Welcome to the Ranchonomics podcast, where we empower you to build a better ranch and transform your operations into a thriving business. I'm your host, John Haskell. Let's get started. All right. Welcome to the Ranchonomics podcast. I am joined again today by Wally Olson and Kim Barker, both from Oklahoma, and we have some exciting stuff to talk about. We have all heard about how the market is high. We have all heard about how the market may drop. We have all heard people whining about how hard it is to do things and you can't make any money in cattle now because prices are so high. And then you hear the other side where everybody's excited and thrilled because prices are high, so they must be making a ton of money. We want to clarify a few things today. And Wally, I know you've got some strong opinions on this matter, so let's dive right in. Where do you want to start?
Where I want to start is, there is people that are just locking up to make good decisions just because of the belief that the market's too high and it's going to crash,
And there is a certain amount of shock value that comes with current prices. Is that fair?
Oh, yes. And also the high prices of, if you have a fixed amount of working capital, in theory, since 2020, your capacity has been cut in half.
Yep. Okay. And a quick note, we're recording this in the second half of March of 2025. So feeder cattle are, what are they at? They're $2.90 or so for August board right now. Fats are above $2. Things literally are hot. The prices really are big.
And bred fall calving cows with the calves on them are selling for $5,000.
Yep. Good. All right. And you and I have spent a bunch of time talking with people about preparing for the market decline, right?
Correct.
And I think sometimes I've worried recently that we've almost talked about that too much to where people are paranoid that the market's going to crash tomorrow, which isn't necessarily what's going to happen. But I think maybe there's a bit of misinterpretation of what do you do in the face of a market that could drop. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. Kim, you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think this is a great opportunity if you're thinking in the right direction, I guess.
Okay, so you see the current market as a great opportunity, which I totally agree.
Yeah, and I mean that for the cow herd, because even if you're not wanting to get in, if you're already in, it's a great time to clean up your cow herd. If you've got cows that are sired by 40-pound milk EPD bulls and they're way too big, well, now is a good time to get rid of them.
Yep.
Because you can trade those off and buy into something smaller and better and more efficient and younger. I think we need to come out of this deal with the younger cow herd, because there's going to come a time where you're going to be culling these ones that are on the verge of being old now. They're going to be culled at a pretty low price, some of them.
Right.
If you get them younger now, well, then you'll be set for a little while anyway.
Yep. Very good. And one of the things that is also happened right now is the price of culls is very high. We're at $1.50 in a lot of the U.S. now on cull cows. So we're in that neighborhood. All right, Wally, keep going.
So what I want to talk about is taking advantage of the market to lower the amount of money you have in your cow herd. And let me give you an example of that. Okay. Lots of bred cows today are selling for $4,000.
Yep.
You can buy back a heifer ready to breed for like $2,000. So in other words, there's $2,000 of appreciation there.
Yep.
Okay. You take $700 of that $2,000 and put with the $2,000 heifer. Now you have a $2,700 bred heifer plus $1,300 in cash.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, as I look at this, I went from having a $4,000 cow down to a $2,700 cow. Am I correct there in my thinking?
I think so. And you put $1,300 in the bank.
And so now other people will say, well, yeah, but you gave up the calf. Okay, I did give up a $1,700 or $1,800 or whatever dollar calf. And so, all cows aren't created equal, and if you're selling 3 and 4 year old cows, you probably gave up that. But if you're selling a 5 or 6 or 7 year old cow that's getting ready to have depreciation, if you have to take off $400 or $500 of depreciation off of that value of that calf just because your cow's falling in value. It's no big thing, So my deal is, here, you're worried about a market collapse. You prepared yourself. You went from a $4,000 cow down to a $2,700 cow. Plus you got cash.
Yep.
Plus you've done what I said. Now you've got a younger cow.
Yes, you got a younger cow.
And if you wanted to change to a slightly different type of cow, you can do that in the transaction, right?
Correct.
Okay. Wally, one thing I want to review real quickly before we go too far with this conversation is, what is the state of your cow bell curve right now?
Oh, it's wonderful.
And I want to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. We're going to compare the value of a heifer calf, let's say a 5-weight heifer calf, to a prime of her life bred cow, which we just talked about selling for about $4,000, and then an old cow. Because I think the cow bell curve got kind of screwy last year, but it has kind of resumed its normal shape. So let's talk about that. So what are the prices we're looking at for a heifer?
What I was looking at here is, instead of a 500-pound heifer calf, I was looking at a 650 or 700-pound heifer. And just because I know some that were purchased for basically $2,000.
Yeah. And I think 1,800 to 2,000, as we've seen that range on heifer calf pretty comfortably. And at 2,000, maybe 2,100, you can buy pretty good quality ones. And then, so again, we've got the change in value, the appreciation part of your cow bell curve from 2,000 to 4,000, let's call it, up to a prime of her life, 4, 5, maybe 6-year-old bred cow. And then we've got old cows, not cull cows quite yet, but older cows, let's say an 8, 10-year-old cow. What are they selling for?
Well, you can buy older bred cows for, $1,600 to $1,800.
Yep. Yeah, they're significantly less, right?
And a 1,200-pound cull cow is $1,800.
Right. We have seen and literally bought cows in that price range, correct? So the drop off from 4,000 to, let's just say, 1,800 is pretty stout, right? So if you're going to ride that down in the current market, that is a big drop in cow values as they get older.
Basically, you're losing $2,200 in value, if I did my math correct.
That's correct.
And if you divide it over 3 calves or 4 calves, whatever, you're talking about $400 or $500 in depreciation.
Yep. And so what you guys are talking about is trying to avoid that big drop. If we have $4,000 cows, we'd kind of like to keep them instead of turning them into $1,800 cows. Is that fair?
That's correct. And one thing you got to understand, since 2020, we have had inflation going on, and the market is inflated by about 100% or more. And what's going to happen on this other side, if you got an older cow herd, you're going to have depreciation that we were just talking about happening, but also we're going to have deflation. And most markets move 50% down. And so, this $1,800 cull cow is going to be a $900 cull cow. So the depreciation that you're going to take is $3,100.
From 4,000 down to 900.
Yeah. So it's going to be a double-edged sword.
Let's try to really not ride that down.
Yep. And also, one thing everybody talks about is, well, we don't have depreciation going on in the cow herd now because they're looking back. Okay, we bought a heifer for $900 and now we can sell her for $1,800. So why worry about it? Well, one, you can't look back and you can only deal with today. Today that cow's worth $4,000.
Yep. And this is one of those things I think a lot of people miss. They're very comfortable riding the appreciation up. But if you don't transact on it, if there isn't a sale in there, then you never actually capture that gain.
That's correct.
For me, it's been amazingly valuable to learn over the years that if that value goes up, you better clip it off and then turn right around and reinvest it. Because when we clip it off, that's when you realize the gain, right? Then that's when you have that money available to you to reinvest. You can ride a cow from $1,800 or even $900 to $4,000 and back to $900, and that benefits you zero. But if you ride her up to $4,000, convert her to a $2,700 cow, and then have to ride that down, you picked up money in the process. You've actually converted that gain into actual profit.
And so if you would basically do this trade 2 times, then you'd have a $2,700 cow, plus you'd have $2,600 in cash.
Right.
So that, you cannot, to me, protect yourself any better than that.
And heaven forbid cows go back down to $900. When you have $2,600, you're going to look like a pretty smart guy able to buy whatever you want, right?
That's correct. And one thing you need to always be doing is dealing with today and looking forward at the relationships. Because as this market breaks, if you look back at what you have in them, you understand what I'm trying to say, and you think, by God, I ain't going to sell, by looking forward, what you're buying back is so much cheaper. It's still a wonderful trade.
Yep. Struggling to break into the tight-knit world of ranching? Connect, compete, and grow with our new networking platform. Real ranchers, real insights, real opportunities. Visit ranching.fyi and click forums. Kim, what do you want to add to that?
Well, curious what Wally would say if you didn't have any cattle at all right now. What would you do if you wanted to get in?
Yep, great question.
Where would you start right now?
If you don't have any cattle, the one thing is people are having opportunities to lease country. And should we do it and not? And, just do the math. And one thing, you can still buy these older cows, even if they are $2,000 or whatever, they're still got good cash flow potential, and they can work that. And you can, buy a cow, sell the cow and the steer calves and keep the heifer calves and probably have them about paid for. Or like we were talking, Kim, you can buy a set of heifers and breed them, run twice as many as you want to keep, or look at it this way. I want to come out of this with paid for heifers. So if you breed them and you sell the opens off, you'll probably make some pretty good money, and then sell half of the bred ones or whatever, and you will have the ones you kept pretty well paid for.
Yeah, that's why I see it too.
Yeah. Like I said, there's plenty of opportunities. Like Jim Gary says, there's nothing wrong with buying high-priced cows, just as long as they're selling high-priced cows. You got to be aware of that. I think that's the greatest statement ever, I said, well, the big thing is always just do the math and don't lock up.
You have a story from the 14s and 15s era about a friend of ours who really had a lot of regret for buying some expensive cows. You want to walk through that example again?
Well, let Kim talk this through. And this is, you can also lease cows.
Yep.
So go ahead, Kim. You're the one that did this. You and Lacey.
You and Lacey went into cow business, right, in 14, right?
Yeah, we leased 135 cows in 14, and we kept them 4 years. And she accumulated cash in cows and ended up buying land out of the deal. And it was not a good deal for the guy we leased cows from, because he took all that depreciation. At the time we did the deal, we thought it was a really good deal for everybody. But as it turned out, it was a really good deal for Lacey, because she ended up coming out of the deal with cows free and clear and quite a bit of cash in the bank. It was just a really good thing to do at that time.
So let's talk a little about the two sides. So it benefited her because she was basically able to start with no capital up front, correct?
Yes.
And she was getting started at the last big peak of the market. So cows were at $3,000 or so at that time, right?
I think 4. I think a lot of them would have brought 4.
Okay. And so then she was able to keep heifer calves, and then the proceeds, her portion of the proceeds from that deal, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then that allowed her kind of to get started. The reason it didn't work out so well for the cow owner was because he owned cows that, as the market cycled back down, basically got older and were declining in value through that period.
Yeah, just like Wally said a while ago, the deflation and the depreciation hit him at the same time.
Yep. And he originally got into that deal because he was trying to avoid taxes, correct?
Right.
Okay. He was retiring or something and didn't.
Well, he'd lost a lease on a ranch that had been in the family for decades, and he sold a lot of cows, but he just didn't want to sell more.
Yep. Very good.
I think he had like 700 cows to begin with, and we leased 135 of them.
Yeah.
And I think he had other lease deals with some other people too.
All right. Very good. And Wally, the situation I was thinking about was our neighbor down in Saratoga, who I think helps us understand if we buy cows in a high market, a lot of people then are followed by regret when the market goes down. And I think you have a better idea of how to deal with that. We don't have to regret that choice. We just have to take the right steps afterwards, correct?
Yeah, this gentleman we were talking about, this was after the break of the market in 2015, 16, and he was talking about how stupid he was. He kept some $1,400 heifer calves back for cows, and
Instead of selling them.
And where he really made a mistake is he had 3 and 4 or 4 and 5-year-old cows or 6-year-old cows even back then. And he kept them and, they just ate his lunch on depreciation and deflation, but nobody writes checks for those things. You understand what I'm saying? If you were to write a check out for that, you'd be a lot more aware of it. Just like they did nothing to have 25% depreciation going on in your cow herd, but you don't write checks, so nobody worries about it. If you lost 14% of your calves, Katie bar the door, you'd be doing everything in the world to do that because you see the dead calves out there.
Yeah. I want to reinforce that example because I have some cows that I paid $1,500 for that right now are probably worth double that. If that goes away, I don't feel the pain of that $1,500 loss. I might think pretty highly of myself, though, riding that up. But again, if I don't do any transactions there, if I don't either trade out of them and turn into something else or figure out a way to capitalize on that $1,500 increase in value, it does me literally no good. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay.
One other thing about Lacey's deal, she kept, I don't know, $1,300, $1,400 heifer calves out of that deal because the price was high back then. Well, right now, what's left of those are, $1,600, $1,700 cull cows.
Yeah.
I mean, they're old now, and now's the time to get rid of them,
This is one of the things that's been different from prior markets that I remember is, man, the cull prices are definitely helping the bottom end a lot right now. You get good money for a cull cow right now. All right, gentlemen, what else do we need to talk about before we wrap up?
Well, like I said, the big thing is just do the math and don't lock up. I mean, if it's a good opportunity, act on it and be prepared, and like I said, you've got to, that's one thing I learned from Bud Williams is get prepared to do these things. It's coming. Don't fear it, but just get prepared for it. And down the road you go. And also when you're looking at leasing land, to me, you need to look at the land you already control and are you getting the most production out of it? You always need to be better before you get big. I mean, I've seen more people think that, God, you just need to get bigger and bigger, and that's not it. You need to get better and better at what you do.
Good. And we are going to talk a little more about that. I want to do an episode here coming up on the connections between things like your grazing management and your financials and the gross product specifically. So we'll talk more about that. But I think in this type of market, you can what if yourself to death. And when the market falls, you can should have yourself to death. And I think you need to be very, very careful not to do either of those things. Make a good decision on the day you're making it, and then make another good decision tomorrow.
And understand that, this cash that you're picking up out of these trades, just set it off to the side. You can get 4 or 5% on it very easily. And, there's quantum leaps in markets. You understand what I'm saying? All of a sudden, you'll just, in 2012 or 13, when it shot up in 14, it's done the same thing now. It's going to do it again. And I don't know if you can talk about quantum drops. I guess you can talk about quantum drops. I had never thought about that, but there's going to be a quantum drop coming, but be prepared for it. We showed you how you can mitigate that very easily.
Good. And be prepared to capitalize on it, because when that happens, there are going to be awfully good opportunities there to take advantage of.
Correct.
Okay. Kim, anything else before we wrap up?
Oh, 2 thoughts real quick. I've heard Bert Teichert say that you should call the ugly ones. However you define that, call the ugly ones.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Bjorn Johansson that's got a YouTube video called Mob Breeding, and he talks about getting rid of grief. Whatever form grief was in, get rid of grief. He said, once you get rid of the grief, you can run lots more of them.
I like it. That's very good. That's good advice. What was his name?
Bjorn Johansson.
Where's he from?
Norway, I think.
All right. I like it. Good.
The YouTube video is called Mob Breeding, and it's pretty good.
Mob, M-O-B breeding.
Yep.
Okay, cool. We'll try to put a link for that in the notes with this, so that'd be good. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me today. I am really honored to have you on and glad we can talk about this. And again, I think hopefully we can set some minds a bit at ease because there's a lot of maybe over exuberance in some parts and almost panic in other parts. And I think we just need to get our minds right and just walk forward and do what the market tells us to do. Is that fair?
Very, very fair.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you. We will talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Ranchonomics podcast. We hope this episode helped you win today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend.